Claudia knocked on Nika's neighbor's window, and when she looked out, she beckoned her with her finger. The door opened, and Nicky appeared on the porch. "What do you want, Klavdia? Why did you come in? Look, Nicky, I want you to keep an eye on my house. I have to go to the city, to the regional hospital. They sent me there with my eyes. They're going down. They're all blurry. And they hurt at night. What happened to them? I can't think of anything. But the doctor says I must have an urgent operation. They say otherwise I will go blind. I don't know where to go and how. I'll ask around. The world is not without good people. You go, Klavdia, of course. I'll look after your goat. Don't worry. You don't have anyone. But really, what if you go blind? How will you live alone in the dark? Baba Klava is in her 70s. That's her name in the village. She's lonely. Life has been battering her, beating her, tested her strength. And in the end, she got accustomed here in the village. She went Claudia. And she worries about the surgery on her eyes. Is it possible to touch the eyes with a knife? Although the doctor said not to worry, Grandma, it's not very difficult surgery. But I'm afraid. In the room, Baba Klava not alone. A young woman was lying by the window, and opposite, also elderly, like her. Claudia calmed down. It turns out she was not alone. Many have sore eyes, she thought to herself. That's the trouble, isn't it? I'm not the only one who's in such trouble. There is a young woman lying there too. After the 30th hour, relatives came to the neighbors in the ward. Her husband came to the young one with his son, a schoolboy, and the elderly daughter and her granddaughters. They brought fruit, candy, and something else. Cheerfully chatting, laughing, comforting. And she lies alone. No one will come to her. No one will bring anything. All alone. She got upset. The next morning she had her rounds. A doctor in a white coat came in. A young woman, a pretty woman in her 40s. That's what Klavdia decided. Baba Klava was very happy to see the doctor. How are you? Klavdia, how are you feeling? Warmly and affectionately she asked. Nothing, doctor. What is your name? Granny asked sadly. Alice, I'm your doctor. Why, Claudia? Don't you have any relatives, children? No, honey, no. God didn't give it to her. The doctor stroked her hand and left the room. And Grandma Klava couldn't find her place. Worried? Why? Why did I deceive her? Such a good woman. And she asked me with warmth, why did I say that God did not give me a child? Because it wasn't true. Claudia didn't want to bring up old memories, old pain she had lived with all her life. She couldn't forget her child. And the older she grew, the greater the pain. She had a daughter, Alice. When Claudia was young, she met Charlie, who was disabled without one arm. There were few men in those post-war years, so Claudia didn't hesitate and married him. For the first 2 years, they lived quite well. A daughter was born, and then a year later, her husband fell ill. No matter what doctors advised or treated, nothing helped. Charlie died. She buried her husband and was left alone with a little daughter. Claudia, in her youth, was prominent, stately, and beautiful. There wasn't much work in the village, but she lived and worked on the farm. At that time, a young man came to their village on a business trip. Thomas immediately took a liking to Claudia. She completely lost her head. And when it was time for Thomas to leave, he began to persuade Claudia to go with him. I have a little daughter, Thomas. What about her? Leave your daughter to her mother. Don't take her with you. You'll take her later when we're settled. Thomas talked me into it. He promised the Golden Mountain a good life. What does a young, beautiful countrywoman want? His promises made her dizzy. She agreed to his entreaties. Klavdia didn't want to live in the country all her life. She left her 5-year-old daughter with her mother. She went far away with Thomas, about a week by train to the Far East. Thomas got a job. So did Claudia. She never saw her daughter again. Couldn't go back. Every time she talked about her daughter, Thomas promised her he'd take her back soon. It just wasn't time yet. She wrote letters to her mother. Then she and Thomas moved to another town. He couldn't stay in one place. Claudia realized that her husband was a frivolous man. They moved from town to town, from village to village. They didn't stay anywhere for long. She didn't even get a letter from her mother anymore. In the beginning, she constantly thought about her daughter. But in time, everything dulled, and Thomas started talking. When we have more children, then we'll have your daughter. But God never gave us any more children. I guess he was punishing her for abandoning her daughter. As time passed, her husband began to drink, and then even got handsy. And so 25 years in a foreign land passed unnoticed. She would have gone on with her husband if he had not been killed in a drunken brawl. She buried her husband, sold her small house, and went home to her mother and daughter. She understood her daughter was an adult, and she expected to see her daughter with dread. How I would look my daughter in the eyes. She left, went away with a man. What if she didn't forgive me? What would I do then? But no one was waiting for her in the village. Her mother died, and no one knows anything about her daughter. She came to the funeral, that's all. Her parents' house had collapsed. 3 days only I lived in the village. I tried to ask about my daughter, but no one knew anything. I visited mother's grave and left the village for good. Heavy memories did not give peace. She moved to another area in the village. Therein lives to this day alone. She curses herself. If it were possible to go back, I wouldn't trade my own daughter for anyone else. But the past can't be undone. She's left to pity and blame herself, to live in loneliness. Baba Klava couldn't sleep for a long time that night before the operation. There was some excitement, although she was calmed by her attending physician. She even wanted to open her secret and tell that good Alice about her pain, about her daughter, and admit that she had lied. Everything will be all right. Don't worry, Claudia. Her eyes will see fine after the operation. They won't hurt at night. The doctor patted her on the shoulder, but Claudia was still worried, and in the morning she suddenly pushed her. Wow! My daughter is also Alice and the same patronymic. A coincidence. She looks at me very kindly, this doctor. I'll ask for her last name in the morning. What if I do? But in the morning, Grandma Klava was taken to surgery. I didn't have time to ask her anything, and there was no time for that anymore. After the operation, she slept for a long time. When she woke up, she felt the bandages. I couldn't see anything. Darkness. She got scared. What if I'll still live in this darkness? She heard that everyone was already up, walking, talking, but she could not see anything. She felt it. A woman came up to her and began to remove the bandages. When the bandages were removed, Baba Klava carefully opened her eyes, but in front of her was a nurse. How are you doing? Now I will call the doctor. The doctor came. The man, the one who performed her operation. There you go. That's nice. That's good, Grandma. Now you have to be careful. Don't strain yourself. Don't cry, and everything will be fine. The doctor left, and the nurse, smiling, said, "Here's some apples, lemon, and candy for you. Alice asked me to give this to you. It's her day off. Drink tea and eat apples. Vitamins are needed too. Oh, my daughter. This is embarrassing." The doctor herself brought me a treat. Alice Baba Klava was looking forward to it. And she didn't come until 2 days later in the evening on duty. When she entered the ward, Klavdia thought the sun had come in. Even the ward was brighter, and the doctor smiled and held some paper in his hand. Grandmother felt in her gut that this paper was something exciting and good. "Good evening, Mother." Alice turned to her. "Good evening. Why do you call me Mother?" "I am very pleased." But bewildered, Grandma asked, "It's because you are my mother, whom I have waited for a long time and looked for." "Mommy, I'm very happy." The doctor hugged her, but Claudia couldn't believe whether she was joking or not. "Sweetheart, it's you." "Barely heard," whispered Claudia. "Is it really you? And how did you find me?" Claudia looked intently into her face, searching for anything familiar. Tears poured from her eyes. Quietly, you cannot cry quietly, but the tears did not stop. And then, calmly, she listened quietly to Alice. "When I picked up your medical history, I noticed the last name. You and I have the same last name. I mean, my last name is different from my husband's now. It used to be your last name, and I always knew your name. I don't know why you hid the fact that you have a daughter, but I'm not offended. I don't know how life works out. My husband told me I should get a DNA test. He's a cardiologist, too, just at the clinic. He took it on himself, and here's the result. You're my mother and I'm your daughter. Here's the proof. Claudia couldn't get over it. Daughter, darling, forgive me for leaving you and not being able to pick you up. How did you live without me? I lived fine with my grandmother. Only when I was 20 years old, my grandmother died, and I was already a student at that time. I buried her. David helped me, my husband. We were just dating at the time. We got married while we were still students, but we got through it. We have a son and a daughter now. Your grandchildren, they're all grown up now. They're very happy. They already know they have a grandmother. Daughter, it's like I'm in a dream, like I'm on another planet. It's like this isn't happening to me. What if I hadn't come here to the hospital? It was God who sent me here so that we could meet. Holding my daughter's hands, my grandmother spoke softly. After the hospital, I will take you to my home. My husband and I have a big house, and we are already preparing a room for you. There is plenty of room. There is enough room for everyone. And again that night, Claudia didn't sleep. She couldn't sleep from the excitement and happiness she felt. She wondered if her grandchildren would ask, "Grandma, where have you been all this time?" What will I tell them? That I was looking for happiness on the side, which I never found. No, I would tell them everything honestly, so my family would know everything about my life. Thank you, Lord, that in my old age I found my daughter. Now I have someone to give me a glass of water before I die. I will ask forgiveness from everyone. I'll do anything for my daughter to forgive me. So she decided and fell asleep. Grandma Klava's life got better. Her daughter forgave her mother long ago, and she was glad that she deserved her daughter's forgiveness. Now there was no fear of dying. Her son-in-law, David, is a very solid man, a real doctor, as she puts it. He took her and his wife to the village to get a goat. Claudia gave the goat to her neighbor, Nika, and she was very happy when she saw Claudia alive and well, and in the company of her daughter and son-in-law.